everyone! Tonight is my birthday, and while it would be great to have a party or gathering with friends, I know that many of you are hopefully enjoying your Thanksgiving Day somewhere with family or friends. So I'm glad to have you virtually join me wherever you are. Today, I will show you how I make my whole wheat challah. Every Friday night, we cut into our homemade whole wheat challah and watch with delight the release of steam rising out of the challah. So after being asked so many times for the secret of this wonderful, wholesome, healthy, and delicious challah, here we go. We will need 7 ingredients. First, white whole wheat flour. Second, yeast. Third, water from the sink is fine. Fourth, eggs. Fifth is oil. Sixth is honey. And 7 is salt. Before we begin, we will put some money into the pushka. You know, the good old charity box. The Lubavitcher Rebbe specified that we should have it handy in the kitchen so that every time before we begin cooking or baking for ourselves, we can be mindful of our obligation and act on the opportunity to help others who may be less fortunate. Now let us begin. I like to start with the yeast. For the yeast, we will need some warm water, a half a cup. So let us take a plastic cup. I use a plastic cup when I work with a yeast dough. I once heard that for best results, it's best not to put the yeast in metal. Not sure if it's true, but that's what I do. I go to the sink and fill about 3/4 of this 7-ounce cup with warm water. It should be about a half a cup. I do this by touch. Not too cold or it won't activate the yeast. Not too hot or it will literally kill the yeast. Nice and warm. Now put about 2 packages of dry yeast. If it's something like this, you can use 2 full tablespoons into the cup of warm water. This is already pre-measured yeast. So we're putting it together. We're going to mix it around. And now we're going to put it aside and let it activate. All right, now we will get ready to take 7 cups of flour. I use the white whole wheat flour. This is 100% whole wheat. It's not a mix, even though it's called white whole wheat flour. It's not a compromise, but for whatever reasons, the scientific reasons may be, it is more manageable and not as dense as the standard whole wheat. So that is what I use. Okay, so the flour is already in here, 7 cups measured. Now we put in 2 eggs. I always check the eggs before to make sure there are no blood spots in it. That wouldn't be kosher. These are already checked. And here they go. And now we have our oil, a half a cup, also pre-measured, and it goes in. Now comes the honey, but before I get to the honey, I just want to mention that as far as the eggs go, I always get the white eggs because the chances of finding blood spots in the white eggs is much less than in the brown eggs. Okay, so the honey. I never measure the honey. It would be a real mess to measure it. It wouldn't come out easily from the measuring cup. So although the recipe calls for a 1/4 cup honey, I just pour straight from the container and I kind of use my eye, but I don't worry if I'll have more than a 1/4 of a cup. Even if it ends up being double, it's perfectly fine. And after that, we're up to the salt. 1 tablespoon is pre-measured, and I pour it in a different part of the bowl where the honey isn't. Now everything is in the bowl except for the water and the yeast mixture. So I'm going to get 2 cups of water ready. It's going to be warm water, very warm water. Okay, 2 cups is right around here. And we're going to put in our yeast. Have a look at the yeast. Look at that. It bubbled up nice and high. Here we go. The yeast is going on in the sugary or honey side. And here comes the rest of the water. And at this point, I will put on my gloves for the rest of it. It's not like you have to put on gloves. Some people love getting their hands into their dough, but I personally enjoy the process much better with the gloves on. I find it much easier that way. Okay, here comes the fun part. Now we get to mix all the ingredients together. I have my gloves on. Everything's in here. And if it's too liquidy, all I have to do is throw in a little bit more flour. Okay. As soon as our dough is ready, we are going to let it rise. We're going to cover it up and let it rise. Now, if this was a bigger dough, this would be the time to make a special blessing. But since this recipe only called for 7 cups, actually by the time we added flour now, it's either 7.5 or 8 cups already. But if it was double this recipe, at that point we would make the blessing. Right now, we're just going to cover the dough and let it rise. Okay, we're covering the dough. I find the easiest thing to use is a plastic bag. I covered the bowl completely. There are no gaps. Some people like to use a warm, damp towel. I feel, for me, this has always worked nicely. And we will put it aside and let it rise. Okay, we are uncovering the bowl and we're about to knead the dough. And one thing to keep in mind, if we need to add a little flour so it's not too sticky, that's fine, but we don't want to push in too much of the flour. We want to keep the flour on the outside. We don't want to make the dough too heavy. We just want to be able to work with it. Okay, I'm going to spray the pan and I'm going to put in these 4 sections right into this bowl, into the pan that is. And here we go. That's the way this goes. Pretty soon we're going to brush it with the egg on top. I'm going to make another challah now. This is going to be a regular 3 braid. Again, we're keeping with simple. And I'm using smaller pans right now. Here we go. We're going to spray this pan. The simple braid of the 3 sections is the same way we would braid a rope or here. Make 3 long ropes. And then we're going to quickly braid it under and over. Under, over, under, over. Okay, and here we go. And it's right here in our spray pan. And now we are going to go to the next part of our process, which is we already shaped the dough. It's in the pan, and we are going to cover it. We're going to brush it with the egg. Here we go. Careful to get as much as we can covered with the egg. The more we cover, the nicer it will look. Okay. And at this point, once it's all covered, we can decide if we want to sprinkle something on top. Do we want sesame? Do we want poppy? Do we want to leave it just plain? Okay, what do you think? Should we get some sesame seeds on top of one of them? Just for the fun of it. And we're all done with the egg brushing. Okay, we're going to choose one of the challahs and sprinkle some sesame on. Here we go. This is what it looks like with our sesame on it. Now we're going to let these rise. And in the meantime, we have some that have already risen from before. Here's what it looks like once it's nice and puffy. And we also have some that are already completely ready in the oven. These are ready to go into the oven. And here we go. We'll take them out of the oven. Here. And here. Okay, have a look. Here's a beautiful ready-made challah, fresh out of the oven. Thank you for joining me. Wishing you blessings and success, and a wholesome, healthy, and happy Shabbat.